My name is Lana, and this is the story of the moment my sister's mask finally cracked. The night she spent $180,000 on a charity gala at my venue, looked me dead in the eye, and told security to remove the homeless woman from the building. That woman was me. And the most twisted part? My entire family was there, watching, complicit, sipping champagne like nothing had just shattered. I should have known something was off the second I saw my name missing from the guest list. It was a Tuesday evening, and I had just finished back-to-back meetings in the upstairs office of the Lucent, the luxury event space I'd spent 7 years building from the ground up. Crystal lighting, vaulted ceilings, a rooftop garden overlooking the entire city skyline. This venue was my legacy, my second chance at everything my family said I'd never accomplish. They used to mock my ambition. Now they booked my space, behind my back. When my assistant Max brought in the printed reservation that morning, I stared at the name at the top of the guest roster and felt my stomach twist. Alexis Morgan Foundation Annual Gala, organized by Marin Morgan. My younger sister, my golden child sister. The same woman who once told me, straight-faced at Thanksgiving, that running a venue made me an overpaid party planner. Apparently, I was useful enough now to host her big night. Max had raised an eyebrow when I didn't respond right away. "Do you want me to cancel it? We still have time." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But something in me said no. Not yet. Let her come. Let her think I don't know. Let her decorate the halls I built. Let her invite her sponsors, her influencers, her donors. Let her underestimate me, again. Because I'd learned something in the last few years. Silence can be a strategy, and I was done playing the quiet one. The night of the gala arrived with humid southern air pressing down on the city. The Lucent sparkled, white roses imported from Florence, vintage crystal glassware, live jazz floating through the rafters. Like a secret. I stayed upstairs at first, watching the setup unfold from the tinted window in my office. I saw Marin arrive in a velvet green gown, trailed by a man I assumed was her newest fiancé. Probably another banker. Her signature smirk barely shifted as she waved to the valet, posed for a few photographers, then disappeared into the marble foyer as if she owned it. I waited. I wasn't going to crash her party. I wasn't going to make it about me. But then Max knocked gently and whispered, "You should see this." I followed him down to the lower-level security room where our live feed monitors were displayed across the wall. On screen, Marin stood near the main entrance, surrounded by guests, sipping champagne. One of our junior staffers, a young intern, named Lila, had offered to help Marin adjust her name badge. She smiled, polite, professional. Then Marin tilted her head, narrowed her eyes, and leaned in to say something to security. Who let that woman in here? Her voice was clear, clipped, and laced with venom. Get her out. We don't need homeless people loitering in the lobby. The guard looked confused. Ma'am, she works here. Marin rolled her eyes. I don't care. If she works here, she should be invisible. Guests first. This is a $180,000 event, not a soup kitchen. My heart dropped. Not just because of what she said, but because of how easily it came out of her. Like breathing. Like cruelty was a language she'd practiced her whole life. The worst part? Behind her, our parents stood smiling, nodding, sipping wine. Not one of them blinked. I didn't wait. I left the monitor room and took the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger would have meant I still expected more from her. I didn't. I just needed her to see me. To see that the woman she tried to erase was the one who gave her this stage. I reached the edge of the ballroom and stood still, taking it in. Dozens of guests in tailored gowns, holding tiny gold-rimmed glasses. Faux empathy disguised as charity. And there she was, my sister, laughing with her fiancé, relishing in her power. She saw me. Her smile froze. She blinked once, twice. Then, audibly for everyone to hear, she sneered. "Can someone explain why that woman is in the building? I thought we had standards." Someone chuckled nervously. Others turned away. The band kept playing. I stepped forward, calmly, my heels tapping against the marble in rhythm with my heartbeat. I stopped 5 feet from her and said, "That woman owns this building." Marin's eyes narrowed. "You're not on the guest list." I didn't flinch. "Funny, neither were you." A ripple moved through the crowd. Eyes turned. Conversations paused. Our mother took a sip of her wine and looked away. Marin's lip curled. "Don't embarrass yourself, Lana." "No, Marin. You've done enough of that for the both of us." The silence after that was electric, and then I turned around and walked back out, slow and steady, each step more freeing than the last. Let them finish their party. Let her bask in her illusion of control, because I wasn't just walking out, was walking into the next move. And trust me, you'll want to stick around to see what happened next. If this part hit you, don't forget to subscribe. There's more coming, more truth, more fire, more stories that cut to the core. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me, because the next chapter, it's the one that changed everything. I sat in my car for a long time after leaving the ballroom. The city lights blinked against the windshield like they were daring me to cry, but I didn't. My face was stone. My hands wrapped around the steering wheel as if I could throttle the years of humiliation I had swallowed just to keep the peace. My own sister had tried to erase me, in front of a crowd, on my own property, with my own staff watching, and my parents? They didn't flinch. Not one of them reached out. Not one of them asked if I was okay. They just let it happen. Maybe that was the part that broke me more than anything else. I remembered being 12, sitting on the cold kitchen tile, while Marin opened a box of shoes 3 sizes too big just because they were designer and she couldn't pass up the deal. My mother cooed about her taste, her eye, her potential. Meanwhile, I stood off to the side in hand-me-down jeans with the hems cut off because we couldn't afford more. Every time I asked why things were different for us, I got the same reply. "She's just more delicate than you, Lana. You're the strong one." When I started the Lucent, I didn't tell anyone. I funded it with the savings I earned from working 16-hour days as a freelance event coordinator and taking every miserable gig no one else wanted. I did weddings in barns with no bathrooms, anniversaries for couples who didn't speak to each other, baby showers where the father didn't show. I designed my first venue layout on napkins and notebook paper in a rented studio apartment where the water ran brown every 3rd week. My sister was in Paris then, spending 3 months soul-searching on my parents' dime. Now, she was spending $180,000 on a charity gala, using my venue, and calling me a homeless woman because I didn't fit the look she wanted to broadcast. Irony wasn't lost on me. I built the Lucent from dust and grit. She just saw marble floors and social optics. I finally drove home, though home was a relative term. My house was modest by city standards. Quiet, older, the kind of place where the heater sometimes clicked twice before kicking in and the porch creaked when you leaned against the railing. But it was mine. Every brick, every loose nail, every uneven window frame. I could still feel her words echoing in the back of my skull. "Kick that homeless woman out." I stepped inside, dropped my bag, and didn't turn on the lights. I didn't want brightness. I didn't want comfort. I wanted honesty. So I walked straight to the back office where my personal files were kept and opened the locked drawer labeled Family. Inside were a few letters, old birthday cards, a single photo of Marin and me from before things soured. I pulled it out and stared at it under the sliver of moonlight slipping through the blinds. We were smiling. It looked real, but now I knew. Better. I wanted to rip it up, to shred it into pieces so small even memory couldn't piece it back together. But I didn't. Not because I forgave her. Not because it still meant anything. But because I wanted a reminder. A reminder of where I came from. Of what I survived. The next morning, I arrived at the Lucent before sunrise. The floors still smelled faintly of roses and polished marble. I stood in the center of the ballroom and took in the aftermath. The leftover petals, the stacked chairs, the silence. Then I walked into my office, sat down at my desk, and opened my email. There it was, an unread message from Marin. Subject: About last night. I clicked it. Body. Let's not blow this out of proportion. You know I didn't mean it like that. It was a stressful night. I was performing for donors. It was a joke. Lighten up. A joke. Being mistaken for a homeless stranger in my own building was a joke. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I'd spent too many years explaining myself, trying to get people, like her, to see me. She never would. Instead, I clicked over to my security footage and found the exact timestamp where she uttered those words to my staff. I downloaded the clip, saved it to a private folder labeled Proof, and uploaded a version to an unlisted link, just in case, because I knew what was coming next. Marin never attacked just once. She built her campaigns like she built her selfies, perfectly staged, deceptively filtered. Max walked in around 7:30, coffee in one hand, a look of concern already forming on his face. "You okay?" "No," I said calmly. "But I will be." He nodded. "Good, because I checked the booking system this morning, and Marin tried to reserve the space again. For next month, under a different name." "Of course she did. What did you do?" I asked. He smirked, declined, politely. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow, steady breath. "Good. Let's make that permanent." And just like that, I started to feel the ground under me again. Because this wasn't just about a single insult. This wasn't just about a party. This was a lifetime of quiet erasure, packaged in luxury, disguised as family. And I wasn't going to let it keep happening. She wanted war? She'd just knocked on the wrong door. I was halfway through drafting an email to my legal team when the first media inquiry hit my inbox. A lifestyle blog had somehow caught wind of the incident at the Lucent, Marin's outburst, the homeless woman comment, the whispers among the guests. They wanted a quote. Not a formal statement. A quote. Something sharp, something that would go viral. I sat back in my chair, the cursor blinking at me like a dare. The smart thing to do was to decline, issue a blanket, no comment, and hope it died down. But that's not how these things worked. I knew better. Silence gets filled by someone else's version of the truth. And Marin, she was already spinning hers. I picked up my phone and, as if on cue, saw her newest post. A sleek, carefully lit selfie taken outside some cafe in the Garden District, her caption so sugar-coated it made my teeth ache. "Family is everything, even when they don't understand your vision." "Still love you, Elle." The comments were already flooded. "You're so strong." "Haters gonna hate. Keep shining, queen." And there it was again, my silence, being used as her shield. She was painting herself as the misunderstood sister, the artist, the visionary. And me? I was the ghost in her narrative. The villain, or worse, the footnote. I could have let it slide, but she'd already tried to turn my staff against me. She tried to reclaim my space like it was hers to decorate and dispose of. And now, she was rewriting the story in real time. If I didn't respond, this wouldn't end in a scandal. It would end in erasure. And I'd had enough of being erased. I opened a blank document and began to write. Not a press release, not an attack. Just the truth. I built the Lucent with my hands, my time, and my credit. No loans from parents, No trust fund, no help. From anyone who now tries to claim a piece of it. I did it quietly. I did it without fanfare. And for years, that silence was used against me. I wasn't the glamorous one. I wasn't the favorite. I was the scaffolding behind someone else's spotlight. But last week, my sister, on a stage she didn't earn, called me a homeless woman at an event I didn't authorize, in a venue I own. That moment wasn't a slip. It was a revelation. Because sometimes, family doesn't see you until you become useful. Sometimes they only come knocking when they think they can cash in on your success. But this time, I'm not opening the door. This time, I'm telling my story before someone else tells it for me. I read it 3 times, then clicked post. Within an hour, it had already started to spread. Comments flooded in. Messages poured through my DMs. Some from strangers. Thank you for saying what so many of us can't. I see you. You're not alone. Others from industry contacts, wedding planners, clients, even people who'd once sided with Marin. They weren't asking for gossip. They were offering support. For the first time, people weren't clapping for the performance. They were standing for the truth. But not everyone was pleased. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. Then a text. Dad. That post was unnecessary. This is family. You've embarrassed your sister. Embarrassed her? She walked into my building and humiliated me in front of a room full of donors. But sure, I embarrassed her. I didn't reply. Then came the message from my mother. Lana, this is too much. Take it down. You're hurting her career. She was just being dramatic. You know how she is. This isn't how we fix things. And that was the moment I realized how deep it ran. They weren't angry because Marin lied. They were angry because I refused to lie with her. Because, for the first time, I wasn't cleaning up her mess. I wasn't hiding the broken pieces under the rug. I was holding them up to the light. I typed back one sentence. Maybe she should have thought about her career before turning mine into a punchline. Then I blocked both of them. My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't shake. It felt like untying a knot I'd carried in my chest for years. That night, I didn't work late. I didn't draft statements or reread my post. I walked through the Lucent slowly, room by room, touching the chairs I chose, the light fixtures I handpicked, the velvet drapes I hung myself when I couldn't afford labor. This place didn't come easy. It came in pieces. Nights I cried, into spreadsheets, weekends spent arguing with zoning committees, mornings where my coffee was cold and my rent was late. But it was mine. Every inch of it. I stopped in the center of the ballroom and stared up at the chandelier. It sparkled like it always did, soft and gold and steady. Then I whispered to myself the words I never thought I'd say aloud. I'm done making myself small. This wasn't just a bad birthday story. This wasn't a social media feud. This was years of quiet loyalty finally reaching its limit. Because some people think kindness is weakness. They think boundaries are optional. They think they can take, and when you finally say no, you're the one who's changed. But I haven't changed. I've just stopped apologizing for growing. By Friday morning, the emails had shifted from passive-aggressive concern to veiled threats. My uncle sent a polite inquiry about what was really going on with the family. A cousin I hadn't heard from in 6 years suddenly wanted to grab coffee and talk it out. Even my mother's bridge club friend, Dottie, sent a message that read like a hostage negotiation. Your poor sister is devastated, Lana. Maybe you could take the post down just for now? You've made your point. But it was the call from Marin herself that confirmed what I'd suspected all along. She didn't call to apologize. She didn't call to own what she did. She called to spin. Lana, she said the moment I picked up, her voice carefully wounded. I don't know what kind of story you think you're telling, but you've made me look like a monster. You didn't need my help with that, I said evenly. There was a pause, sharp and tight. I was emotional. It was a high-stakes moment. I didn't know the cameras were still on. You didn't know you were being watched when you humiliated me in my own building? Another pause, this one longer. This could hurt both of us, she said finally. Do you really want to go down this road? I stared out the window of my office at the river winding its way past the French Quarter, calm and deliberate. The same way I wanted to sound. I'm not on the road, Marin. I'm standing exactly where I belong. You're the one running. Then she said it, her voice clipped and tight with venom she couldn't quite hide. You don't get to blow up my life just because you finally decided you want to be seen. And there it was. The truth she'd been choking on since the day I made my first post. She wasn't angry about the press. She wasn't panicking over her image. She was furious that the shadow she'd cast for so long was now shrinking. I hung up without another word. She texted me an hour later. This isn't over. You think they'll still side with you when I tell them everything? What everything meant, I didn't know. Maybe the time I didn't loan her money when she maxed out her third credit card. Maybe the time I told her fiancé, who, by the way, wasn't exactly faithful, that he should reconsider his definition of love. It didn't matter. I wasn't afraid of her truth. I just wasn't willing to carry it anymore. That night, I arrived at the Lucent just before sunset. The building glowed in the fading light, elegant and quiet, waiting like it always did. My assistant Mallory met me at the door, her face pale with nerves. She's here, she said, motioning toward the inner courtyard. I stepped inside and found Marin pacing, dressed head to toe in designer neutrals like she was auditioning for a redemption arc that no one had written for her. I need to talk to you, she said before I could even greet her. Without your staff listening. They're not listening, I said calmly. They're working. Something you wouldn't understand. She flinched, just barely. Look, I know we've had our issues. I raised an eyebrow. Our issues? You publicly degraded me in front of a room of clients and donors, then tried to turn the internet against me. That's not an issue, Marin. That's a campaign. I didn't mean to go that far, she said. It got out of control. No, you got caught. She exhaled through her nose like a child holding back a tantrum. Fine, I'm sorry. Is that what you want? I'm sorry. Can we move on now? I stood there, letting the silence stretch long and uncomfortable. No, I said. Because you're not sorry. You're just afraid. You thought you could cash in on my work and laugh at me in the same breath. And when I didn't let you, you played victim. That's not remorse. That's damage control. She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. I'm done cleaning up after you. I'm done being the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who makes things okay. This time, I'm choosing myself. For the first time since she walked in, Marin looked stunned, like she didn't recognize the version of me standing in front of her. You've changed, she said. No, I said. I've just stopped pretending I owe you anything. The tears came then. I don't know if they were real or performative, maybe both. She stepped forward, desperate now, voice cracking. We're sisters, Lana. Yes, I said softly, but that doesn't mean I'm your safety net. She turned and fled the courtyard, her heels echoing against the stone tiles. I didn't follow. I didn't feel satisfaction. Just release. I walked back through the halls of the Lucent, each step quieter than the last. For years I'd carried the weight of being the backbone no one saw. I was the logistics behind her spotlight, the silence that made her voice louder. But not anymore. By the time I reached my office, the lights had softened to gold. My inbox pinged. A message from a local business journal. Subject: Would you be open to sharing your story? I leaned back in my chair and smiled. This wasn't a revenge story. This was a reclamation. And for those of you watching who have ever been told to, Stay quiet for the sake of family, who have ever been the scaffolding behind someone else's show. I want you to hear me. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe them your stage. It was a Thursday morning when I found the envelope. Crisp white paper, hand-delivered, with my name scrawled across the front in a handwriting I hadn't seen in years. There was no return address, but I didn't need one. I recognized the scent before I even opened it, Chanel No. 5, Marin's signature perfume, always just a little too much, always meant to linger. I peeled it open with steady hands. Inside was a card, thick, cream-colored, embossed. In gold, a formal invitation, elegant, detached, pretentious, the kind you send when you want to pretend everything's fine. It read, "The Monroe family cordially invites you to a celebration of unity and grace. Location, the Lucent Grand Hall. Hosted by Marin Ellison. Time, 6 p.m. sharp. Dress, formal. RSVP required. No apology, no acknowledgement, no phone call. Just this." A performance invitation wrapped in velvet. I stared at it for a long time. Unity and grace. The irony nearly choked me. Marin had declared war, dragged our family name through digital mud, and now she wanted a public reconciliation staged under my roof. The same roof she tried to claim. The same venue she once had me kicked out of like I didn't belong. She wanted a reset button, a rewrite, a new headline. But this wasn't her script to control anymore. Still, I didn't toss the invitation. Not yet. I slid it into my desk drawer and walked out into the Lucent's main hall. The light spilled through the glass ceiling like honey, soft and warm, and the place hummed with quiet purpose. My staff were setting up for a corporate gala later that evening. Meticulous, focused, proud. I watched them for a while before turning and walking toward the lower level. Toward the archive. That's what I called it, unofficially. A room most guests never saw. Floor-to-ceiling shelves of blueprints, binders, ledgers, years of work. Every permit, every design sketch, every invoice. I ran my fingers across the spines of the files until I found the one I needed. A folder labeled simply, Marin, past events. Inside were receipts, schedules, emails, proof. I sat on the cool marble floor and opened my laptop, logging into the internal system. I pulled surveillance footage, old email chains, time-stamped documents. Not because I planned to use them, but because I needed to remind myself. I hadn't imagined it. The manipulation, the guilt, the carefully calculated chaos. It was real. It happened. And I survived it. By the time I looked up, the sun had dipped behind the skyline and the floor above had gone still. I returned to my office and found Ina, waiting, a question in her eyes. "She's throwing another event," I said. "I saw the invite," Ina replied. "Unity and grace, huh?" I smiled without humor. "It's a trap." "Are you going?" I didn't answer right away. I paced the room, fingers trailing along the edge of the bookshelf. My whole life, I'd been conditioned to make peace for the sake of appearances, to swallow the disrespect, smile through the betrayal, and show up dressed for the family photo. But this time I wasn't the one who needed to prove anything. "Yes," I said finally. "I'll go." Ina raised an eyebrow. "What's the plan?" I turned to her, calm and composed. "Let her throw her show. I won't interrupt. I won't speak. I'll just stand there." "That's all?" I nodded. Because silence used to be what they used against me. Now it's what I use to remind them I'm not afraid anymore. The night of the event arrived like a storm in silk gloves. The Lucent sparkled in candlelight, filled with people who wore smiles like armor. Guests mingled under chandeliers, sipping champagne and offering polished compliments, completely unaware that beneath the surface, something darker was brewing. I arrived last. A deliberate move. When I entered the grand hall, heads turned. Not because I made a scene, but because for once, I didn't try to blend in. I wore midnight blue, tailored to power. No glitter, no lace, just structure. Strength. Marin spotted me immediately. Her smile faltered, just a flicker, but I saw it. She stood on the stage with a microphone in hand, already halfway through some rehearsed speech about forgiveness and family legacy. She gestured toward me as though this was part of the script. "And tonight," she said, her voice trembling with carefully placed emotion, "we welcome back my sister, Lana, the rock behind our roots, the architect of this beautiful venue. A woman I love, more than I always showed." Polite applause followed. People looked at me, waiting for me to take the bait, to offer a tearful nod, to walk up and play along. I didn't move. I stayed exactly where I was, by the back pillar, spine straight, chin high, expression unreadable. And I clapped. Once, twice, just enough. Marin hesitated. Her eyes searched mine for something. Approval, permission, absolution. I gave her nothing. She turned back to the crowd, stammered through the rest of her speech, and stepped off the stage with a wine glass in hand that trembled just slightly. That's when Beckham approached me. Her ex-fiancé, the one who had ghosted. Her after the last fiasco. "I didn't think you'd show," he said. "I almost didn't," I replied. "You handled that with grace," he said, genuine admiration in his tone. "No," I corrected gently. "I handled it with clarity. Because here's what I've learned. Grace without boundaries is just martyrdom. And I'm not a martyr. I'm a builder, a survivor, a woman who no longer attends emotional fires unless I'm holding the extinguisher." That night I left early. No grand exit. No final confrontation. I walked out into the warm New Orleans air, my heels echoing against the pavement like punctuation marks. When I got home, I poured a glass of water. Not wine, not something to numb, but water. Something clean, something real, and I sat on my balcony watching the city pulse beneath me. Not because I'd won some battle, but because I'd finally stepped off the battlefield. If you've ever been made to feel like your silence was the price of love, if you've ever been told to smile while someone else steals your spotlight, just know this: you're allowed to rewrite your story. The morning after Marin's little Unity Gala, the Lucent was spotless, not a single rose petal out of place. But I felt it, the residue of something darker clinging to the walls. Maybe it was the way the staff whispered a little too quietly that day. Maybe it was how guests had looked at me like I was the footnote in someone else's redemption arc. Maybe it was how Marin's voice, syrupy and trembling behind the microphone, still echoed in my head like a lie that hadn't finished unraveling yet. I tried to work. I really did. Contracts, supplier invoices, renovation quotes for the back terrace. But every time I tried to focus, that moment played over and over again. Her smiling at the crowd, naming me the rock behind our roots. While twisting the knife with a performance disguised as tribute, she hadn't changed. She just upgraded her strategy. That afternoon, I received an email from a journalist I knew well. His subject line said it all. "Just a heads up, she's leaking." The message was short, sharp. Apparently, Marin had approached a mid-tier gossip outlet with an exclusive about our family. The piece would frame her as the misunderstood sister, emotionally neglected, financially manipulated, overshadowed by the overachieving sibling who never learned how to share. She'd even sent them photos of our childhood home, of me leaving the Unity Gala alone, and of an old note I wrote her once in high school that said, "Please, don't tell Mom I stayed out late. She'll kill me." The implication was clear, that I'd always been a liar, that I'd always had something to hide. But what burned wasn't the leak, it was what came next. I got a call from the Monroe family, Elowen's personal assistant, voice tight with discomfort. "Hi, Ms. Calder. I wanted to reach out personally and say we're putting the summer partnership with the Lucent on pause, for now. I didn't ask why. I knew. In one move, Marin had done what she always did, twisted her own failure into someone else's downfall. She wasn't just dragging my name through the mud this time. She was choking my business with it. I hung up, walked into the ballroom, and stared up at the crystal chandelier that I personally selected when the space was still a pile of drywall and dust. I had signed every permit, oversaw every blueprint, hired every team. This place wasn't just my business. It was my lifeline, my legacy, my way out, and she was trying to kill it. Ina found me sitting on the staircase 30 minutes later, hands clenched, phone dark on the floor beside me. "She's scared," Ina said quietly. "This is desperation, not power." "Desperation can still ruin people," I said, my voice flat. Ina sat beside me, not saying anything at first. Then, "What do you want to do?" I didn't answer right away, because the old version of me would have stayed silent, would have worked harder, hoped the truth would rise on its own. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "I'm going to remind her that I don't whisper anymore," I said. "I built this stage. She doesn't get to headline it." And that night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I told the truth. Publicly. Not in a scream. Not in a post aimed to cancel. I wrote a letter. An open letter addressed to the sisters who've had enough. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I just wrote about what it meant to be raised in a house where survival meant silence. About being the one who gave everything and still wasn't enough. About being guilted, gaslit, used, and expected to show up smiling every time someone else needed a shield. It wasn't bitter. It was raw, clean, surgical. By morning, it had gone viral. People weren't just sharing it. They were sending it to their sisters, their mothers, their therapists. Comments flooded in. This was me. Every word. I felt this in my bones. "I finally left my toxic family last year. You just put my silence into language. Even now, I get chills remembering it. Not because of the attention, but because I realized something. I wasn't alone. I was never alone. I just thought I was because no one had dared to say it first." That afternoon, Marin called me. I didn't answer. She tried again, texted, emailed. "We need to talk. You're making this worse than it is." Then later, "You really think this is going to fix anything?" But I wasn't trying to fix anything anymore. I wasn't trying to heal the unhealable or explain myself to someone who saw vulnerability as currency. I was burning the script. 2 days later, the gossip outlet quietly pulled the story. No apology, no statement. But the link went dead. I knew exactly why, because the truth was louder than the lie. And this time, I'd spoken first. If you've ever felt like the black sheep of your family, if you've ever been made to believe your voice only mattered when it served someone else's comfort, this part of the story is for you. You don't have to keep proving you're the good one just to be allowed in the room. You don't need to stay silent to keep the peace. The truth might not give you closure, but it will give you freedom. 3 days after my letter went viral, I received a formal invitation, hand-delivered by courier, thick cream cardstock sealed with wax. There was no name on the outside, but I didn't need one. The envelope smelled like Marin, like peony perfume and curated pretense. Inside was a printed card that read, "An Evening to Reconcile," hosted by Marin Callahan. Private dinner, the Glenridge Estate, 7 p.m. dress code black. Tie the back was embossed in gold foil. "Let's show the world how sisters forgive." I stared at the card for a long time. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I understood it too well. This wasn't about peace. It was about optics, about control. She wasn't asking me to heal. She was asking me to perform it. That night, I stood in front of my mirror in a dress that didn't feel like armor. No statement jewelry, no revenge lipstick. Just quiet, precise elegance. I didn't wear power tonight. I wore clarity. As I pulled into Glenridge Estate, a valet opened my door with rehearsed politeness, but I could see the recognition in his eyes. I wasn't arriving as a guest. I was the headline. The estate had been dressed for spectacle. Crystal chandeliers under tents, classical string quartets nestled in garden alcoves, champagne served in coupe glasses etched with initials. Her initials. MCI stepped onto the terrace just as a ripple passed through the crowd. Marin stood at the center, wrapped in silver, laughing like forgiveness had always been her best accessory. When she saw me, her smile didn't falter, but her eyes shifted, calculating. Careful. "Lana!" she called out, arms spread like she hadn't just tried to erase me with a leak and a lie. "You came?" I didn't return the embrace. "I was curious," I said simply. She lowered her arms, recovered with grace. "Well, now the family can breathe again, right? The sisters are together, just like old times." The crowd leaned in. Subtle glances, silent cameras. I gave them nothing. We moved inside for dinner. A long table glittered with candelabras and polished silver. Name cards marked every seat. Marin at the head, of course. Mine was beside her. I sat. She waited until glasses were full, plates untouched, then stood to toast. "I want to thank everyone here," she began, her voice thick with manufactured sincerity, "for believing in love and loyalty, even when things get complicated." She turned to me, and to my sister, Lana, who reminded me what truth really looks like. There it was, the illusion of accountability, the public repentance without the private cost. She raised her glass. "To healing." I didn't drink. Instead, I stood slowly and met her gaze. "You want truth?" I said, voice low but clear enough for every fork to pause midair. "Let's tell it." The room went still. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the document she never expected me to keep, the forged reservation contract from the Lucent, with my forged signature and her planner's email trail still attached. I laid it gently on the table between us. "I built the Lucent from the ground up," I said, my voice calm but undeniable. "And you tried to ruin it. Not just with gossip, not just with optics, but with a lie. You forged my approval, leveraged my reputation. And when that didn't work, you tried to turn the world against me." Gasps scattered across the table. Marin's face went white. "And then," I continued, "you invited me here, not to apologize, not to reconcile, but to pretend, to stage forgiveness like it's PR. I paused, then stepped away from the table. "I won't be your press release, Marin. Not tonight. Not ever again." Silence held the room hostage. Marin reached for me, desperate now. "Lana, please, we can talk about this later." I turned, looked her in the eye, and for the first time, I said what I should have said years ago. There is no later for us. Then I walked out. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. Because this wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. Outside, the night air was thick with the scent of lilacs. My heels clicked against the stone path like punctuation at the end of a chapter. Halfway to my car, I heard someone call my name. It wasn't Marin. It was Eloan Monroe. She approached, slow and deliberate, her expression unreadable. "That," she said quietly, "was the most poised demolition I've ever seen." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "You know," she added, "families like yours don't implode. They perform implosions until someone decides not to be part of the act anymore." I didn't respond. I just nodded. She smiled. For what it's worth, that was the moment I actually believed in you. Then she walked away. I drove home in silence, no music, no calls. Just the road stretching ahead, wide and open. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was returning to myself. 3 weeks after the night I walked out of Marin's reconciliation. Dinner. I received a letter, not a message, not a voicemail, not another press stunt. A handwritten letter, mailed to my office at the Lucent. It was folded neatly inside a soft cream envelope, sealed without a return address. But I recognized her handwriting before I even opened it. Lana, I don't expect you to read this. But if you do, I hope you know that none of this turned out the way I meant it to. I wanted to be seen too. I didn't know how to exist in the same room as you without feeling invisible. Maybe that's not your fault. Maybe it's mine. I'm sorry even if you can't forgive me. Marin, I folded the letter and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk, beneath a stack of building permits and contracts. Not because I forgave her, not because I planned to reply, but because sometimes the apology isn't for reconciliation, it's for remembrance. A marker that says, this happened, and it mattered, and you survived it. When I stepped outside that evening, the air smelled like honeysuckle and the weight on my chest didn't follow me for the first time in years. The Lucent glowed behind me like it knew the burden it had helped carry, brick by brick, moment by moment. This wasn't just a venue. It was a lifeline I built with my own calloused hands while my family tried to rewrite my name in footnotes and shadows. Looking back now, the story people saw, on their phones, through headlines, in tearful confessionals and dramatic walkouts, it wasn't really about a party, or a hotel, or even a $90,000 manipulation. It was about visibility, ownership. The moment a woman finally decides that being the responsible one doesn't mean being silent, that the title of sister doesn't come with a lifetime lease on your identity, and that choosing peace over performance is the loudest rebellion you'll ever make. Because the truth is, this story began long before Marin stepped into my hotel and called me a homeless woman in front of strangers. It began when I was 9, and she got the lead in the school play while I handed out flyers. When I turned 16 and worked 2 jobs while she dropped out of her second college major. It began in the quiet moments, the ones no one claps for, where I showed up, fixed things, paid the bills, and watched my name get erased from the narrative of our family. They used my silence as scaffolding. But they didn't realize that one day I'd learn how to speak. And when I did, the whole damn house shook. I didn't win. Not in the way we usually measure victory. My parents haven't called. Marin's influencer brand took a hit, but hasn't vanished. The apology came on her terms, and I didn't get a standing ovation. But I got clarity. I got the kind of peace that doesn't ask you to shrink yourself just to fit someone else's comfort zone. I learned that family isn't defined by proximity or DNA or tradition. It's defined by honor. By who shows up for you when it doesn't benefit them. By who listens without scripting your silence. By who loves you without needing you to be small so they can feel big. So many of us walk around thinking that strength means endurance, that if we just hold on a little longer, bite our tongues a little harder, give a little more, we'll finally be seen. But sometimes strength isn't staying. Sometimes strength is walking away before the lie becomes your truth. If you've ever had to step back from your own blood to breathe, I want you to know that you are not heartless. You are not cruel. You are not broken. You are finally free. Let me ask you something. What would your life look like if you stopped waiting for their apology and started writing your own ending? What if your worth didn't depend on their approval? What if survival wasn't enough and you finally demanded wholeness? Maybe today is the day you stop performing the version of yourself they accept and start becoming the version of yourself you deserve. Drop a 1 in the comments if that truth lives in you, or tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one, and I carry your stories with me. And if this hit something deep inside you, if you've ever needed someone to say what you've never dared to admit out loud, subscribe to this channel. Because there are more stories coming. Stories like yours, stories like mine, stories that remind us we're not invisible, not anymore. Thank you for being here, and thank you for choosing yourself, again and again and again. Until next time, speak louder, stand taller, walk free.